Hello everyone, my name is Andrew, and today we're going to be taking a look at the 2016 Volvo XC90 T6R design. Yes, this is a 4-ish year old car. And the reason why I want to take a look at this is because I want to show you guys how the XC90 has held up over those years. And maybe it'll be a good value for somebody who's looking for a luxury SUV, something that's really safe and, in my opinion, really good looking, but maybe you don't want to spend the new car prices. So is it worth looking at a 4-year-old XC90? Well, we're going to find out after the intro. But before we get going, I want to give a special shout out to Mercedes-Benz of Wilsonville for handing me the keys to this 2016 XC90. Yes, they sell used cars as well, and if you're interested, please check them out in the website down in the description below, as well as their Instagram and their Facebook. So I want to take a quick moment to talk about the exterior of the XC90, and as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I do think it is a good looking SUV, mostly because there's nothing on it that really pokes out at me and is offensive, but it's also very unique looking. I don't think there's a lot of SUVs out there on the market that look like the XC90, and part of what helps it are these headlights. So it has these like Thor's hammer is what I think they call them, LED daytime running lights are in the shape of a T, and a lot of other manufacturers are using, you know, like a strip of LEDs on the bottom of the headlight or even a circle, and to be quite frank, those are played out. I think manufacturers need to take a little bit more time designing their headlights, and I think Volvo has done that here. It's simple, but at the same time sets it apart from the other manufacturers. I also like these brushed silver accents on the grille as well as the mirrors and the roof rack as well as the window trim. Moving on to the back of the XC90, I think it's wonderful that it has a tow hitch. However, I wish there was a way to cover this when you're not using it so it just looks a little better. Now there is two sides to that coin. One is this way you have nothing to lose, right? There's no plastic cover. The hitch is always here. Whenever you need it, you just put it in there, you know, put your pin in, hook your trailer up, you're good to go. And when you take your hitch out, you don't have to worry about finding that plastic cover and covering it up. However, some people aren't ever going to use this, and it would be nice if there was just a way to cover it for those people out there that aren't going to use the tow hitch on their XC90. A small detail, but something that I thought was worth pointing out. Okay, something kind of funny is I totally just found this, which is the tow hitch cover. It even has a Volvo logo on it. Let's just see what this bad boy looks like when it's installed. Nope, that doesn't look very good either. As you can expect, the Volvo XC90 does have keyless entry as well as keyless locking and a keyless ignition, but something that I find really funny is the Volvo XC90 key is actually really nice. It has this premium feel. It's not really heavy, but it has this sort of faux leather with metal sides on it. And it's just neat that Volvo took the time to design a key that feels really nice in the hands. So moving on to the interior of the XC90, the first thing that I really notice is the amount of movement this driver's seat has. And what do I mean by that? Well, I'm the type of person that likes to have the front of the cushion a little bit higher than the back of the cushion. And here I feel like there's just so much adjustment that I really haven't seen in a car in a lot of years. In my Mercedes that I own, I feel like there's just enough for me to be comfortable, but in this I feel like there's more than enough, which is great because obviously not everybody has the same seating preferences, and so it's nice to know that Volvo has thought about everybody and said, you know what, we're going to throw as much adjustment as we possibly can in here. And speaking of the seats, they are really comfortable. I have sat in Volvos or driven Volvos and actually owned Volvos that were more comfortable. And what I'm more specifically referencing is the top half of the seat. It just feels maybe a little bit too firm, but maybe over time it'll soften up a bit. I don't think you're gonna really have an issue in this car on a long road trip though. Now, I will say the part that sort of blew me away was the fact that this steering wheel adjustment is manual. Yes, like manual, there's no motor to adjust it. Now, again, there's two sides to that coin. One is, well, Andrew, nothing's going to break on this steering wheel, it's fine. And the other side of that coin is this is a luxury SUV. I would think they would put a powered, you know, telescoping and tilting steering wheel, but not the biggest deal. So let's talk about something less boring than a seat adjustment. Let's get this car turned on. The button here to turn the car on is really cool. You actually twist it to turn on and then twist it to turn off. It's really unique, sets this Volvo apart from the competition. Our infotainment system, I've heard, has been sort of controversial. I've heard people say that the Volvo system in this XC90 is buggy, glitchy, not very good. However, in the few hours that I've been driving this thing around, I have messed around with it quite a bit. I haven't noticed any glitches or bugginess. What I will say is it's really well laid out. It took me all of probably 2 or 3 minutes to really get well acquainted with the system and how it works. So that's your homepage where you swipe right to get to your safety features as well as some of your basic settings. So you can have like road sign information pop up in the head-up display. You can adjust your head-up display in this menu. We can activate our camera system, which this has a 360 camera system, which is really nice. As well as our basic safety features such as lane keeping aid, park assist, cross traffic alert, distance alert, as well as the auto stop start. And then if we swipe all the way to the left, we have our application. So here we have AM, FM radio, Sirius XM, etc. The climate control is pretty straightforward. You tap which fan speed you want. You can hit auto climate if you really wanted that. We have the ability to adjust our temperature individually, or we can have it's synchronized, so whatever the driver's temperature is what the temperature is for the entire cabin. Let's talk about the third row seat here for just a second. Well, how do we get back there? Well, it's really simple. We pulled back this top handle, folds the seat forward as well as moves it forward, so we have really good access to the back seat. But what I will say about the third row is it's probably big enough for either your 5 or 6 year old or your misbehaving 16-year-old. And the reason why I say the latter is because there is absolutely no power outlets back here. So whatever phone or tablet or thing that they're using is going to surely die and they will be in pure misery. All right, what is the 2016 XC90 like to drive? Well, over the last few hours that I've been cruising around in this thing, I'd say it's very neutral. It's neither super sporty nor super pedestrian. It's not very exciting, but it's also not characterless. And that's sort of the theme of this whole XC90, I feel, for me anyway. It's very unoffensive. The engine in this thing is a little 4-cylinder that seems to have enough power to get onto the freeway, but it's not going to blow your mind. And the handling characteristics are very much so in the middle of being sort of perfect and dialed, and then also just being kind of thrown together. And so in comfort mode, which is what we're rolling in right now, the air suspension is sort of spongy, I would say. That's sort of the way I would describe it. But it's not awful. It is absorbing the bumps, I would say, probably a little bit better than, say, a typical coil spring setup might. You also have the dynamic mode, which we will go into once we find some corners, which lowers suspension a bit and also stiffens it up a bit. It's quite nice. It seems to get rid of some of the sponginess, although you do feel some more bumps. So let's go into dynamic mode here. Yeah, so I forgot about that. The throttle response also changes. So it downshifts and then gives you a bit more performance out of the first like 30 to 40% of the pedal. And that lends itself to be a little bit more sporty, but it's not going to be a weekend, canyon carver by any means whatsoever. We're gonna really test it around some corners here. So that was probably 50% throttle. It wasn't too bad. It's not super quick. The engine's relatively quiet, which I like. Again, I think the XC90 is more tailored towards people who are just trying to buy something that's nice, but they don't have to spend a bunch of money on. And especially on the used market with these depreciating, these are becoming a tremendous value. I definitely feel a lot more of the bumps with the sport mode on. I want to mention that the transmission in this is also really smooth. When I'm just putting around town, not in sport mode, I'm not doing anything crazy. I don't really feel the gear shifts, which is really nice. It seems to be really smooth. But when we get into dynamic mode, it doesn't really feel like it sharpens up the shifts at all. It feels like it's the same shift times, but they're just, the transmission is holding the gears a little bit higher, which isn't necessarily a bad thing either, but worth noting. Some sport modes or individual or whatever they call them, dynamic modes, when you switch to them, will give you some sharper gear shifts, but in this, it seems to be just a normal gear shift. Okay, so we're coming into some corners right now. I'm in dynamic mode. I want to test it out a little bit, see how flat we can get this thing through the corners. That's not bad. So it feels like it's front heavy. I'm not really sure how to describe this. Oh yeah, yeah, there's definitely a lot of front end slip right through that corner. I think that you call it understeer, right? Yeah, a lot of understeer, and it wasn't too scary though. I didn't feel like I was gonna lose control. But what I will say is it stayed relatively flat through those corners, and in the dynamic mode anyway. I'm sure in comfort mode it wouldn't have been that nice. But that's pretty funny. I mean, even if you're pushing this thing to its limit, it didn't feel like I was going to lose control at any point in that corner. It felt pretty planted, and you know, we weren't even going that fast, but did get a little tire squeal out of it. So, but there does seem to be a lot of weight up front. Again, this is an SUV. You're not buying this for the performance. You're buying this mostly as just a daily driver. I would assume most people would be anyway, and so yeah, it's going to be just fine. You're not going to notice the understeer. I'd say overall, I'm really impressed with how much is packed into this XC90, being that it's 4 years old. We have pretty much all the modern amenities that you would expect from a brand new, you know, loaded luxury vehicle, with the exception of maybe an active lane keeping assist feature to like keep me in the center of the lane actively. It does, like, you know, pull me back into a lane if I'm drifting off, but it doesn't actively keep me in the center. Like, I wouldn't be able to just take my hands off of the steering wheel and let the car do the driving. That's not at all what this system does. However, if you're doing a long road trip, this is going to be a really nice place to be, you know, even with the lack of the lane keeping assist, even having, or sorry, the active, like, you know, lane centering. I don't know what you would call it. It does have lane keep assist, but even with that being said, it's still a really nice rig to have. It's going to keep you nice and safe. Overall, I'm pretty impressed with the way that this XC90 drives and the features that it presents, even in 2019. All right, so now that we've got the review part out of the way, let's talk about how this XC90 has held up over the last 4 years and 32,000 miles. Well, aside from the normal stuff like, you know, rock chips and things like that, surprisingly well. The interior seems to be built like a tank. The rubber dashboard is without any blemishes and things like that. The door sills seem to be relatively scratch-free. The bottom part of the door panel will normally, you know, you might kick your foot into and it scratches the crap out of the plastic. You don't really have that on these door panels. Even the driver's side seems to be relatively scratch-free. Now, the XC90 doesn't have all positive points. I will say that the seat cushion, especially near, you know, the left leg, seems to be deteriorating a little bit quicker than I would say is normal. And we also have some micro scratches on the center infotainment system. Now, I'm not really sure what material they're using to cover the LCD. Maybe it's probably not Gorilla Glass, obviously, but maybe they should have used it, because I noticed some micro scratches. Long term, I'm not sure if it's going to become a problem with the functionality of the screen, or if it's going to be so scratched that you can't even see text on there. But worth mentioning, at 32,000 miles, there are some noticeable scratches. But other than that, this XC90 has held up really well over the last 32,000 miles. And I really do think that long term, it's going to be a solid investment. Now, obviously long term, I'm not sure how reliable the engine is in this thing or the transmission, but it's young enough where you can get an extended warranty, get a CPO version of this car, and not have to worry about any repairs like that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope this helps you in making your decision if you're looking at any of these 2016 XC90s. Go on AutoTrader or Craigslist or wherever it is that you look for cars and check out the prices on these. In 2019, this thing has held up really well. I mean, as far as the tech features go and the interior resiliency, we'll say, it's really quite a high quality product in my opinion. You know, there are other options out there. Definitely don't see this as the only option. But like I said, it's held up really well, and I think if you can find one at a good price, these are worth jumping on. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit subscribe. It helps me out. I'm a tiny channel. And if you like the video, also hit the like button. And if I missed anything about this XC90, if you want to know anything else about it, just hit me down in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer any of your questions. And until the next video, I hope you guys have a good one. Cheers.